or welcome. We're just starting. It sounds like we already have one person here. Thank you for the like already. Let's give a little bit more time just for kind of people to come in, the notifications to be sent. But while you're waiting, thank you for joining. I want you to know that for us, if you can, just go ahead and try to um, use just English for any of your type of questions, so that way we can be engaged and we can understand and um, you know. So yeah, welcome everyone.
Yes. Welcome everybody. Good morning. It's where we are. It's early Saturday morning for me. It's a little later in the morning for Kusal. And I know we have people from all over the earth plane that are going to join us. I'm going to share this out to my Facebook community and I'm going to just share this in a few places. So while we're waiting for people to join, good morning. We have a few people coming on. Um, we are happy to interact. We'll take time to answer questions during our chat today. And we're just here to serve and teach everybody how to become the best versions of themselves. I guess this is really what this whole series, YouTube live podcast is about. It's how to embrace the highest, best version of you and create from that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Becky. And you're absolutely right. While we're waiting for everyone else to join, just kind of the initial purpose is today we're going to talk about how when things happen in life, you can always have a chance to take action with your own self. Like you can break the cycle, you can learn that you have power, you have influence, and but what we're really excited about is this is our fourth one. So if you haven't already, check out some of the other ones. So even though each of these lives are specific to a certain content, everything works together, and it will kind of go in this like figure eight connection of how it will all be interconnected. So we did intuition and just learning how to connect with that true voice. And I think that was one thing that I think before we kind of get into the topic here, really talking about intuition might actually be kind of a good recommendation, because I think that inner voice is what you're gonna use to realize that you have the power, and that's the power that you're going to leverage. So Becky, how would you kind of describe intuition again?
It's that inner, quiet, loving voice. It's non-judgmental, it's not pushy, it's just there's that inner knowing. And, we talked about this in the first episode that we did, and I highly recommend to go back and watch it because it's super enlightening. And, that was one of my biggest challenges in my journey. I remember when I was like digging in like so deep, I was like looking for podcasts on how do I discern my intuition versus my pain and trauma and triggers, because our triggers and our trauma will yell so much louder than our intuition. And a lot of the time we'll go with that because it feels safe when really it's going to lead us down, the same path that we've been down. And this is why it's so important, to follow that intuition. And, your intuition led you here this morning. Your intuition leads you where you go during the day. We make those conscious choices. We either make them consciously or unconsciously. So that intuition is that quiet inner voice that is guiding us always.
I like that. So it's the inner guiding voice. It's the inner part that isn't judgmental. It's the part that receives information, and it's also the part that just knows and feels. So I think that's great. So for you all, let's kind of start in and kick off. So again, I'm Saul Matthew of Koos's Key. This is our fourth live that Becky and I have done together. This is Becky Lee of Soul Alchemy. Becky is fantastic. She has been such a wealth of knowledge, and she has a couple communities that she is involved with. Her link and her bio information is below. So if after you watch this and you want to understand or you want to connect more and have someone who is a healer and be there for you, Becky is the person. I recommend her info's down below. And Becky, do you want to introduce yourself before we kind of jump right in?
Thanks, Kusal. Like, yes, you know what? We've gone over this in previous episodes. I really have a hard time using like describing myself in words because we're so much more than these titles we give ourselves. But yes, that's who I am. I am a community builder. I am an ascension guide. You know, pretty much. I can use so many words to describe it, but I'm here to guide people, assist people in guiding themselves back home to their soul and their soul purpose. We all have these purposes. We all have these reasons we're here. And so many of us struggle in life to find them. And really, the struggle is keeping us from them. We need to learn to be quiet and allow it to come to us and allow ourselves to open up to it. So, thank you. And I would love to hear an introduction from you. I don't think I've really heard an introduction from you, you know, in our for you introduce yourself with your name, but who are
Yeah.
you? What is your purpose?
So I'm Kusal Matthew. The reason why I'm doing this is I've had my intuition, my inner voice that has been guiding me for some time, just wanting to help others normalize their pain and not suffer as hard. My life has been an oxymoron. There's been so much of my life that has been fantastic. By my 20s, I took over a lending division at a regional credit union. I grew, and before I got let go last year, I was like an executive level at a global fintech. I burnt out. I always did everything to level up and grow and grow and grow, but it was all for the wrong reasons. And so for me, when this transition happened, a little part of me said that there is a sense of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put notifications off, but there was a sense of this feeling, and it was like you're meant to help other people realize that their pain is not so, it doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't have to be in a sense of like we're suffering in silence. And I feel like for me in my journey, though I had all these other great like career things, I had a family, like all the things felt right, but I just never quite felt happy. And for me, this passion project was just about helping others find a sense of inner peace. I'm a Buddhist, but I grew up, with a dad who was Catholic. My mom, and Buddhism is really not a religion. It's more of a way of life, and it's realizing that, nirvana or finding that is something that we can have that you do in this life. That enlightenment and awakening is kind of connecting with the mindfulness and the consciousness and realizing it's the ability to awaken our mind and take a little bit more control. And so as I've been going on my, spiritual journey, my health journey, this has just really been a labor of love to give so much information and knowledge that I've assessed over time. Back in 2020, I had issues with infertility. I had some health issues. I wasn't this, lean as I was. I was a lot heavier. I was really unhealthy, and I needed to figure out why I had all this anxiety, all this pressure, and this rage and this wrath sometimes within me. I was the most helpful people pleaser and kind person, but inside, I was just so unhappy because I wasn't living my authentic life. And so I took my years of being a lifetime learner, because I hated to read growing up, and I've been reading almost a book a month for the last 3 4 years now, and maybe even more some months. So who I am is I am a person who has suffered in life, and now I'm using my pain to help others find their own strength. So that's who I am, Becky. That's really long,
That's so beautiful.
but that's me.
And that's alchemy. Like that we take our pain and we don't, you know, instead of spreading it on to others, we create love from it and unconditional love and we spread that out to others. And this is, you know, this channel of yours, this passion project is to assist others in their journey because if we don't share our stories while we're here, nobody will know. We live in this world of information. And that, you know, we can take in turn and say, man, we're so much more triggered on a daily basis because we're constantly bombarded with visuals and things coming at us. But when we take it as an algorithm for our inner state of being, we really take ownership back to ourselves. You know, there's a saying that says you're not responsible for the things that happen to you as a young person or a child, but you're 150% responsible for transcending those patterns, transcending that pain and not passing it on to others. It's on you. It's on everybody here. Nobody's going to come to rescue us. So that's what our job is here, is to assist people in that. I actually have a tattoo on my arm from one of my dark when I was in a really dark phase, and it says find strength in pain in Latin. And I took
Wow.
that from a song. It was a Mumford and Sons song, and I was like, I really like that line. I'm going to take my pain and I'm going to take it and create strength from it and pull myself out of this hole that I'm in. And
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing. And it took a lot of digging, and I kept falling in, but you finally reach the sun and you're like, holy crap, I got this. I'm doing this.
Yeah. I love that. We'll have to share tattoo stories because my first tattoo was my entire back, and I did it on my spiritual journey, kind of reliving the pain and just kind of writing or putting new tracks in my brain and letting go of some of that. And Victoria, thank you so much for your comment. I appreciate the engagement and honestly the engagement, the feedback, and you putting in maybe some of your story, on the other side and kind of making this interactive is what has made these lives so impactful because it's that one-on-one. It's that um, realizing that, as Becky said, we're while we're here on this earth, like at some point, like who I am, I'm not going to be born again. Like I will, my energy will, like, there's a reincarnation, but who I am from this perspective, like Kusal Matthew from, 2024 or 23, this version of me won't ever exist again. And even when I, pass on, I need to make sure that all the good that I did, the good karma, all the good deeds continue to have more of a cycle. And I think the more that we realize that we can we can do more with our life. And I think the more that we shut down that inner voice, that intuition that Becky talked about, that's when a lot of my own fears, that's when a lot of my own that's when the emotions and the thoughts started overwhelming me.
Yeah.
And Becky, with you on your journey, I know the tattoos were probably also you kind of reliving and kind of going through some of that. But how was that? How was that transformation of realizing that things were happening to you and not because they were, not because of your own doing, but you had to kind of shift into like the mindset of doing. Like, how did you just one day be like, "Hey, I'm gonna break this fucking cycle. I'm gonna do this. Like, I got this." Like,
I have a really powerful mind. I'm really stubborn. I'll tell you that. I'm like probably one of the most stubborn people you meet. And I remember my aunt saying to me, because I was destroyed so many times in my life. I should be dead 5 times over. And she said to me one day at like some family function, she's like, Becky, you're like a cockroach, and not in a bad way. She's like, you could have a nuclear bomb go off around you and you'd be like dancing. Because I used to dance in the pain, because I used to love it and thrive in the chaos and in my own triggers. And so I'd want more of that. It's like people who are addicts for things. It's like, man, I love that drama. And I was like, I woke up one day and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? My nervous system can't handle this anymore.
mhm,
My body was starting to shut down. My mind, my cognitive ability was so slow. Like I was like an old computer where
yeah,
like I'd be at work making really dumb mistakes. And I'm quite
I can
intelligent. And I'd be like,
relate.
why can't I function? And it was the trauma. The triggers became so in the front that the day-to-day stuff, I was waking up choking in my sleep. It was like my body was telling me, stop this. And
Wow.
so one day I decided just to get out of my own way. That's really what it is. When we decide to get out of our own way, stop being our own worst enemy, stop self-depreciating ourselves, quit hurting your body with things, you know, and hurting other people because you hurt. I was like, man, I can change this. And I just did. I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm going to change my life for my kids, for
Yeah.
myself, for my family. But really, it was for me. and I realized my power. And in that, it was that intuition. That intuition is like the spark for the fire in your belly. And when we're constantly snuffing it out, we're feeding off other energies. When we feed off our own intuition, we become super powerful because we don't have to look outside ourselves for the answers. When we have a trigger, we'll go into the triggers here. When we have a trigger come up, instead of calling your friend and complaining, or, causing a bunch of drama around the trigger, blaming the other person for it, you go within and you're like, why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
What is causing me to react? Because nobody else around me is reacting this way or seeing it this way, And
Yeah.
I realized that you could have 30 people in a room and somebody could be speaking and two people could be severely triggered and everybody else could be laughing. So, and I'm like, is that on the person speaking? Or is that on the people who are triggered to worry about and deal with? It's on the people triggered. It's
Yeah.
on me if I'm triggered by something.
Yeah. Wow. I agree to all of that, and I think I'm gonna kind of reply backwards. I think the realizing that emotion, that trigger or that rush of emotions. I think for me, I had to realize that like that when that happened, one that knowing that happened was almost like the aha, like, okay, I there's the work. I don't have to question like what the fuck's wrong with me. That like I just need to go in and dig in like why am I feeling the way that I am? And to your point, then I had to just know and understand and kind of get down to it. But I think that you said you had a hard mind and you were really kind of strong-minded in your whole sense, like one thing you mentioned is when you were a kid, you were dancing, so you were already able to kind of self-regulate. You were able to move and get out some of those emotions, but as we get
Yeah.
an adult, like, if I'm pissed off at a fucking board meeting, I can't just get up and dance and let my anger go, you know? So I think the hard part is as adults, like we just grit it in and then we don't have a ground and sometimes to kind of get that out. So,
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And I think realizing that, and I think that's where we kind of went to with some of our other two lives is, after intuition, then it's like embracing the fear. Then it's kind of like learning to self sabotage and kind of learning how we reconnect with ourselves. That's kind of how it flowed because ultimately, realizing that, hey, I'm going to take some action, I'm going to work on changing my future really stemmed from seeing that cycle, at least for me. For you, it was feeling yourself shut down, feeling yourself, go through that. And it's powerful. I'm reading the Britney Spears book, A Woman in Me, or in her. I mean, not me, but you know what I mean? But ultimately, like I feel so bad because she didn't have the safety growing up, and she just thought that the trouble, the abuse, the amount of like things that she was going like like she just felt that it was normal. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I did my channel and why I did all this, and ultimately everything I create and put on here is about the other person on the other side, because I think for you all, once you realize that this is normal, this is a natural part of life, your automatic stress cycle, the like most humans are very textbook, but we want to, we're all individuals because of our own perspective, but that doesn't mean what happens within isn't very textbook. So I
Yeah.
think having that humility to know that, like, hey, I can be an individual, I can experience life my own way, but my reactions are very humanistic and common. Then you can also kind of realize that cycle, it's a formula. It's something that you can change the X, the Y, and you can get a different output.
I love that. It's about changing, adjusting the algorithm. I always look at it like I'm such a visual person. So it's like I think of a radio dial. If you're listening to something on the radio and you don't like it, like old school radio, what do? You turn the dial or you press the button and it seeks a new dial. And it's about tracking what we feel without judgment. That's the first thing, not judging ourselves. We get stuck in this cycle of shame and guilt for our feelings, and that will kill the whole process of trying to transcend these triggers. Don't feel guilty or bad if you've in your trigger state, if you've hurt somebody else, make amends, Make amends with yourself and be like, okay, this is a version of me that I no longer want to exist. This, I need to make amends, let my ego go, and come back to myself, love myself a bit more, find out what's created this. Like you said, we're like we have all these chemical reactions going on inside of us. Our nervous system is telling us something's off and the alarm bells start going in our brain. And
Yeah.
that's what causes the trigger. It's from something. Like our brain is in our body to protect us, whether it's from perceived danger or real danger. So if you were a child and you were abandoned as a child, and like your parents weren't there, they weren't present, and say in your relationship or you're dating somebody and you're perceiving they're abandoning you, or they're saying something and those bells are going off when the person might not even be knowingly doing that. This is where you need to like give yourself more love, and it goes back to that inner child healing. It all connects, right? And then you ask yourself, I like that deep introspection. It's like, why? Maybe write it out. Why am I feeling this way? Oh, well, my dad left at some point or left me somewhere when I was a kid, and this is where all these feelings are coming back. Or my mom wasn't present when I was a kid. Or, you know, the bus forgot me. When it can be something that the school bus forgot to pick you up and you felt abandoned. And
Yeah.
that's been in your nervous system for 30 years. And you finally realize that this is something you need to let go. And it's not like the past, we don't live in the past. But our mind wants to keep us in that cycle until we create those new neural pathways, those new ways of thinking and feeling.
Yeah. I think it's important, like, when you're in that feeling, like, it just the thing is, when that's all you've known for your whole life, like, for 30 years of keeping that, abandonment, or, and for me, it was fear, it was, the fight or flight of, like, I just had to be hyper vigilant. I had to see the patterns, and I think realizing the way in which we had the pain, and the way that in which we form these, like, wrong biases, were, that really stemmed for my root cause. But realistically, as much as I wish I was dancing,
In the
I
boardroom.
wish I could say your name. I was burnt out, or I was angry. It was like I would argue my point, and if they didn't understand, and it became like it was more of a control thing, it was like, why are you just, like,
It's a
protest?
need to be heard, right? Like
Yeah,
so
like,
many of us need to
at
have
that
this
point.
need to be heard.
Yeah, and sometimes, like, when you were in those situations and you had to just execute, and you had to do the best for the organization, ultimately, one person, if you were the decision maker, it needs to be your decision. And if you're trying to, you know, get get everyone on the same page, when some people just wanted to control, or they just wanted to have a sense of voice, when ultimately their voice is so removed, their perspective really is so removed from what the day to day is, it just didn't matter. And for me, I would I would say it in a way where it was heard, and if it wasn't received, where they would agree, then it didn't matter how I said it, because I made sure I was right. So I would just
Yeah.
negotiate to the point, and I would debate, and I would be very logical to the point where people couldn't out debate me. Like RFK type stuff. Like,
Yeah.
and ultimately, I had other supervisors say, "It doesn't matter if you're right, you're wrong." And ultimately, I was like, "No, bitch, I was right." And and this was a man, and I'm sorry for saying, bitch to him, but ultimately, I was like, "Fuck you!" Like, that's your own shit that you're putting on me. You're
Yeah.
3 senior levels of or 2 senior levels above me. Your boss agrees with me. His boss agrees with me. Just get out of the way. And it got to the point where I didn't ultimately I realized, and this is where my trauma came from, where I had situations of, I had an overly aggressive father, and I also had situations where, I was also just a smart individual. Like, I just understood things, and I just had an issue with authority, and I didn't respect. You had to earn my respect from a young age, and it didn't matter if you're an adult. Like, I I saw myself as an equal to everyone, and I treat everyone like an equal.
Yeah.
Ultimately, when people use these, like, things to control, and the more I felt controlled, the more aggressive and angry I was like a caged animal ready to just, like, rip out someone's throat. And I used to do taekwondo, and I'm a pacifist. Like, I try to be so nice and calm now is because I had it in me for so long. It was my survival instincts, and
Well, yeah,
those
that's that parasympathetic nervous system. That's exactly it. You're an animal mind.
yeah, and I think, realizing that I'm safe. And
Mhm.
right now, like, me being dysregulated is what's causing all this other issues. And so, to your point earlier, I had to own the fact that this is on me to fix.
Yeah.
Like, my reactions, my stuff, it doesn't matter, like, if, like, so in my in hindsight, I realized that I could be right, and so could my boss. We could both be right. Both truths could exist at the same time, and that took
Yeah.
me a couple years to finally integrate my ego. And I think that's another buzzword that we talk a lot about. Ego. But realistically, what is ego? Like, I have my own perception of it, but Becky, how would you kind of describe ego?
Well, the ego is different for everybody, and I love that you brought that up. Like, there is truth in everything, and there's different truths like across all these timelines. Because if you look at life, before I touch on the ego, it's like there are so many different timelines of life going on. There's infinite amount of reality, so there's truth in everything. And when we can let go of that judgment of somebody else's truth, and realize externally fighting actually causes more discord and energy than going within, you can actually work with people and yourself more in your mind than you can by verbally speaking to them, because that's like the power of creation and manifestation, another good buzzword. But what ego is all of these biases we hold within ourselves that we've created from our lifetime and previous lifetimes and future lifetimes, if you believe in that side of the coin. And it's the ego, like I said, our brains decide to present ourselves. The ego is the lower mind, and when I say lower, I don't mean it's better or worse than anything. It's just this animal instinct in us that knows we need to eat, it knows we need to procreate, it knows we need to sleep, and it knows it wants to fight. And I don't understand the fight, like it needs to be number one. And when we can integrate those parts of that, knowing that we don't need to fight, we don't need to be number one because we already are, um, we can really unknot these little bits of trauma within us
Mm,
and ask ourselves. And you said that you told yourself you were safe, and I loved that because that is a huge step in that healing process, is telling yourself you're safe, telling your ego it's okay. The first step is to realize when it's your ego flaring up. And good signs of that is you get emotional, because our higher self doesn't get emotional. It's just
love
knows. Like
it,
it
yeah.
feels loving, it feels expansive, and it doesn't get angry. Anger comes from ego, fear comes from ego. All these lower emotions to protect ourselves come from ego. And it's about like untying the knots, unwrapping the gift, because there's a gift inside that. We need our ego. The ego has become such a buzzword that's like looked down upon. Our ego is important. We can't live with, we need to balance, we can't live without our ego. Our ego keeps us going. But knowing when our ego gets inflated or hyper diligent, or wanting to take us somewhere where we shouldn't go, that's when we need to, tell ourselves we're safe and come back to our heart. It's about pairing the heart and the ego.
I like that. I actually never heard someone explain ego, and to I'm gonna try to paraphrase kind of what I thought I heard is, on your side, it's the animalistic spirit, it's the survival instincts, it's the part of us that is programmed to just exist. It's the energy. It's almost the automatic self. It's almost like the animalistic part that we can't always control. And I think, I can definitely empathize, and not empathize, but I can, uh, from my own perspective, my own feelings. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I've definitely seen my ego as definitely that survival instincts. Like, it's definitely been the part of me that has been when things got to survival, it didn't matter what was in front. It did what it needed to survive. And for me, it was the part that at times I always just kept bottled in, because ultimately, if I let my inner animal out, he was difficult. I mean, he was angry, he was hurt, he was, and so for me, it was kind of blocking that entire emotional sense. So I had to just numb and keep the animalistic part just in a cage, and so it's funny how we both explain it, but we can both feel it in the same way,
Yeah.
and for other people, I think it's their inner child that was,
And I
you know,
was reading Victoria's comment there, and I love that. It's because it is. The ego is all these pieces of our childhood that shaped us. And like I said, it's meant to protect us. Our ego, if we didn't have a super balanced childhood, our ego is like this warm blanket that keeps outside danger away and we wrap ourselves into it. It is conditional. It's conditional on our feelings. And when we realize we don't require that condition, and our vulnerability and our heart is our biggest strength, and our, getting to know ourselves, your ego really keeps us from getting to know the inner bits of us.
yeah,
No,
no.
you don't have to be sorry for
Yeah,
interrupting
we
us. I
actually
love
want
that.
this. Yeah, we actually
Yeah.
want the engagement, Victoria. So please keep, giving information. I paused to read your information, but ultimately, what you said is very much, it goes in line with what Becky and I said. Essentially, Becky said it was the survival instincts. It's the animalistic that just wants safety and wants to, because if you're not safe, you can't procreate. You don't want to eat. Like your stomach and all that stuff shuts down. I do believe my infertility came from my chronic stress,
Yeah.
because ultimately my body's like, well, 10 years of hyper stress, like shit's been shut down, like the factory's open, but it forgot the recipe, like, but ultimately, I think for you, what you said and what I said is it's survival. It was the parts of us that we just couldn't quite, like it's a part that just needed to survive. And that's kind of what you said, what you felt as a child and how you felt, and the humiliation aspect. That's funny you mentioned that, because that's in the Brittany book. That's actually one thing she mentioned as well. It's the guilt, the shame, and I think it's tough because when we have all that carrying on. And here's one thing that I had my aha moment. We need to sleep. And when we sleep is when we take our short-term memories and we put it into our long-term memories, and it's out. And then we have this whole like em- this whole space of like jar that we can put new information, we can process information. But one thing is, when we have trauma, a little part stays in the short-term memory. It never actually goes into our long-term memory.
Hmm.
And so every day, every year, you know, that we have this where it never gets to go through because we're just so afraid of it and we don't want to put it into our long term, automatic self. That extra pressure, one, it causes a couple things. It reduces the capacity in which we have every day. And then two, as we're holding on to that, it takes more and more and more pressure and control to one, keep it quiet, because two, we don't want to be crazy and we don't want to always be ruminating with the same thing that we can't quite process. But two, we need to live our own life. And so I think realizing, where the pain came from, why are we having some of this? What it helped me is I had this overwhelming rush, and it was like this inner child wound that would finally like feel. Like I remember something with my daughter, something going on, and when we were working through it, I realized how triggering it was. And once I finally got her adjusted, I left her with my ex-wife, and I went to the bathroom, and I just this rush of emotions. I just fucking cried. Like I felt this pain just release, and it felt like this feeling, and I had this rush of memories from being like 7 or 6, and it just came out. And then 2 days, I was able to just kinda think through and process it, but then, like, what it really felt like, this trap pain went, I slept on it, and I was finally able to let it go.
That's amazing.
But it took me 30 years, because 'cause I'm 30. 7? Yeah, I'm 38 soon, and, ultimately 30 years of keeping this in this short term, in this box, and all I needed to do was just let it go, but I couldn't until I was able to either handle the pressure or work through to figure out the why. It was just holding on. And so, I think for all of you watching, I think realizing that this stuff that we carry is just gumming up the works. Like, are we at 10%? Are we at 20%? How much of our mental capacity, our consciousness, goes to this pain?
I love that, and you're like I think you're reading my mind, like, we're such, like, so on the same wavelength with so many things, like, I was just thinking the word gunk as you were saying that because when I do energy clearings, we get gunk in our energy system and of our nervous system. And that's so beautiful because that's like somatic release, what you felt. It's like you're actually releasing from your nervous system, your muscles, and your mind. And this is like, as children, our mind is protecting us. So it will, like you said, it will hide that pain. It's in that memory bank, it's embedded, but it will run behind the scenes in our subconscious mind. And I pulled up a course that I teach just with
Yeah.
some information on the ego, and I just want to read something. So it says the ego is the self-conscious system that is narrating part of the human consciousness that reflects on one's thoughts, feelings, actions, and inhibits or legitimizes them to oneself and others. So it makes you convinced that they're real. In this sense, ego is very like what is meant by the term identity. And ego functioning refers to the components of self-consciousness system that relates directly to mental health. So as soon as you feel like somebody's trying to make you feel less than, that's your ego because you're not less than. That's your perception of what's going on. I had a trigger yesterday where I felt like I wasn't good enough. And I didn't realize it because I got really angry. And then
Mm.
I'm like, this is me comparing myself to somebody else or somebody's opinion. This has nothing to do with me. As long as I'm doing my best and serving at my highest best good, I need to release that, and it goes back to that little girl who was never chosen, who was never, always chosen last in school to be on a team. It's like
Yeah.
that ego, that pain hides and resides within us.
I think of Drew Barrymore and when she goes back to high school, anyways, I agree with you. That feeling is, like when you felt triggered, and one, you're worthy. You're meant to be here. You do a lot of things, and we're all on a different track. So first and foremost, before I ruined it with the Drew Barrymore joke, I want you to know you're appreciated, and you have a lot to offer, and we're on a different path. Everyone is in life, and so know that. Um, but two, I want uh, what you said really connected with one of my videos I did, like, when I was first building this stuff, and it talked about the parasympathetic nervous system. That's kind of the fight or flight, and that's when we're activate or trigger. That's the one always controlling. And the automatic nervous system, that's the other part of us that is able to um, actually, that's the stuff that says, hey, we're safe, everything's okay. But ultimately, what I realized in hearing what you just said, and kind of the what I just said, is long-term memory is the automatic stuff. So once we've learned everything, experienced, everything goes into long-term memory. So if we're holding everything in the short term, we're not able to let it pass through. That's where there's a disconnect. The ego, the automatic stuff, the experience is saying, we're fine. Like what the fuck are you doing? But ultimately, short-term memory hasn't let it pass for them to be able to share that knowledge because there's a disconnect. And I think the triggers and the pain is really that sense of our, like, aha, like it's literally the disconnect between the two parts of our being, and I think the more that they can agree, the less cognitive dissonance, the less anxiety, and the less pain you're going to have. And I think when we don't have enough experience that offsets either one side's thing, they're just always fighting, and and ultimately our inner consciousness, our intuition's just listening. And ultimately, until it's overwhelmed, it's not going to shut both sides of it down. And I think that's where it really stems from, really finding where that trigger is, that pain, and then kind of being able to kind of like figure out the why. And Victoria, I'm glad that what we're saying, help it make more sense. And I think that's really been the power of Becky and I is we both experience pain. We both talk about it in very similar, but using different lingos and different wording in a very pragmatic and logical way. And we just want other people to realize that pain that you're feeling is so common. And the fact that you had an aha moment, that's perfect because ultimately it's three individuals that have gone through different pain who all felt it and experienced it inside the same way. That shows that we really are, as humans, one soul, one energy, but it's our perspective, it's our own unique perspective and our own biology, it's our own the history of the genetics and the things given to us. It's really what's defining us. So like, wow,
I think, like, that is so well put, and it is. We're all different, but we're all like droplets of water in the same ocean, and we're all moving together. And we're all, we're one consciousness. That's ultimately what I teach people is we're one consciousness. If you want people to change on the outside, if you want to change things on yourself on the inside, you go within. You always go within. There's no one to change but self ever. If somebody's showing up and triggering you, it's not their fault, and I'm not saying to stay in an unsafe situation, but you're perceiving things. So either you're not setting loving boundaries for yourself and you're letting yourself go and you're allowing people to treat you a certain way, especially as adults. As children, it's a different story because as children, they don't have control over the situations they're in. Their parental units do, and I use that term sometimes, you know, widely because parents aren't always parents as they should be.
yeah.
Um,
Go Brittany.
but as adults, we need to show up. And so whether if somebody's treating you poorly, don't allow them. But that comes from building that self-confidence and knowing that, sometimes setting these firm boundaries, either people will show up differently or they'll fall away. Because if we allow people to treat us the way that we don't deserve to be treated, we're setting that precedence. Something my mom always told me was you teach people how to treat you. You
True.
honestly do. And we teach ourselves how we treat ourselves. So if we treat ourselves poorly, and don't take care of our mind, so our ego or our higher self or our soul self, and we're not like being hygienic with our mind and we're constantly saying nasty voices inside our head to ourselves or to others, that's how life's going to show up to us. It's about flipping that switch and working to find the beauty in the mundane and the day-to-day life and find the gratitude and understand that you're worthy. And, we're all on these different paths. Don't become your pain. Because when you become your pain and your pain becomes your veil of protection, we pass the pain on to others, whether unknowingly or consciously.
I, yeah. I mean, I think what I'm processing, um, but that's beautiful though. I mean, like embracing the pain and working through and towards it and learning you have control in it and setting boundaries. And, I think the hard part, and I'm going to be the other person on the other side, because my initial reaction, my whole life has been someone would say, I need to take ownership, I need to do it. But the issue was I enjoyed the validation. I enjoyed the negative, like I I enjoyed the poison. I enjoyed the toxicity, and it because without it, when you didn't know what safety was, you would almost recreate it sometimes, or you would be drawn to those dopamine hits and those toxic type relationships that the intensity of the validation would really um, like like I kept recreating it, and that to me, Becky, I didn't realize how much of my own self doing, that was because I just didn't know. I didn't know I could have a better future. So to your point, I think you say people just need to go towards it. I think like it's hard when people just they're drawn to the pain that they're used to. And I think safety can almost be more triggering because it's so
It's
fearful.
unknown. And we talked about that in our childhood wounds live. And it is, that's so amazing that you brought that up. And it's so, thank you for sharing that because that's like super intimate and super, enlightening for so many people that, to feel that they're not alone. The discomfort is our drug when we're in that place. It's our drug. Like you said, the dopamine hit, the drama is our drug. This is where trauma bonds come from because we're so used to relationships being unsafe, we create those. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and we get stuck in that cyclical loop. It might be different faces, but it's the same relationships, whether it's with siblings, whether it's with partners, whether it's with friends. We create these loops. They're feedback loops for our mind. Every if you start I'll give everybody a piece of advice here, and this changed my life. When you start using the outside as a feedback loop for your own internal algorithm and like mindset, you start to realize and take your power back and go, okay, why is this person showing up like this? And not everything's a mirror because there's little things that do show up where it's like, no, but it's all about how you react to the outside circumstances. Are you going to feed in to that drama loop or are you going to dust your shoulders off and be like, "I got this. I don't want this anymore." And you're gonna take yourself to a different plane of existence.
I love that, and that kind of goes back to why we're here is, reacting and not responding. I'm sorry, responding rather reacting to life and the outside stimuli and the things that are happening and, taking some of that ownership and I'm gonna say it maybe in a way because I don't know how to read your name, so I'm gonna say, Fracta, just 'cause that feels good, and that's part of it. Part of your so Fracta, I think what you said is perfect, and I think it ties into what Becky said, and it goes into this thing, and this is all know that the drop is trying to merge into the ocean, but few know the ocean is trying to merge into the drop.
That's so
So
perfect.
ultimately, what that means is if we are always the drop who's trying to rush and find the ocean, what usually happens is if while we're going towards the ocean, just know the ocean's trying to come back to us. The faster we run towards it, the faster it's moving away from us, trying to come back from the back, trying to catch up to us. So the more that we can just stay still and just realize that our power in action sometimes or learning how to just receive because ultimately the ocean and the drop will connect when it's time for them to connect. But the more the ocean tries, or the more the drop tries to catch with the ocean, that's where the fear, the anxiety, and because ultimately you're trying and trying, and the results, it's not meeting your needs. It's like I'm doing all the things, but why isn't the objective happening? But ultimately, if we just realize is, hey, what's meant for me is gonna find me. And I think Becky said that in a different way earlier. To your point, the ocean will come to me, and I just need to, embrace the fact that maybe I'm chasing the wrong things and a- and I'm recreating the wrong things to try to maybe trap it or catch it, but ultimately I just need to do live my life and what comes in is meant to come in and I'll manifest and create with, you know, the universe.
And I love that. That's so beautiful. And I love that saying. And fractal, I think it's fractal infinitas, so like fractal infinities. Uh Yeah, it's a message of showing aware and compassionate, recognizing we're all unique expressions of one. We are all the one. I am that I am. I always say that to myself when I get into myself. It's like, no, we are all the same expressions of one. And, expanding on what you said, it's like when we're chasing something from a scientific perspective, we're creating excess potential. And what is excess potential? It's pretty much like static electricity. And it's like when you rub your hands on the carpet really fast, you're pushing things away because you're creating this bubble of excess potential around you. And you're actually pushing away that which you're trying to attract in because you're overthinking, you're overdoing, you're pushing. That's how the laws of energy works, like the cause and effect laws. When we realize that we can when we stop pulling off the outside, people around us, this third dimensional reality, and start pulling from source, whatever that source, that name you give the source, we pull the energy from there. We become a conduit of this beautiful source energy and we spread it out around us. We start to attract. If anybody is looking for something to read, read the Tao Te Ching. Wu Wei, effortless effort. It's about setting the intentions. It's about doing your inner work and then allowing what's meant for you to come to you. And that doesn't mean giving up, throwing the towel in. It's about learning to work with your own energy. Where's your mind? Your energy is where's your thoughts? Where's your mind? When you're triggered, it's fine. That was 2 seconds ago. Where am I now? Where am I now? Am I still living in that trigger? Is that trigger gonna control me for the next month like it used to? And I'll go down the rabbit hole and I'll go do really stupid things or I'll hurt other people from it. Or am I going introspectively within and going, how can I overcome this trigger? What do I need to release? How can I show up differently for those around me? How can I show up differently for myself? That's the key to this existence, is going within, learning that and knowing there's nobody but you to change. We live in a society of victim mindset and it's getting worse daily, especially in North America. Everybody's poor me and I'm not judging anybody. However, it's creating this chaos in our energetic frequency. We need to go within. And one of the best sayings I ever read, and I think I've said this in previous episodes with you, was when you're easily what is it? When you're easily triggered, when you're easily affected by the outside, you're easily manipulated. And I was like, wow. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and I think you said it in the right way of why. I think these people have a lot of pain and hurt, and what's happening is they're rubbing their feet on the carpet and trying to spark something inside, and all they're doing is giving all their electrons away, pulling from society. They're becoming kind of selfish because they're just a negative being because they've given all their energy and ruminating and they're doing it in the wrong ways. And I think once we can ground and once we can heal as society, I think when we individually can do our own healing, take our own power back, what happens is one, you raise your level of consciousness, you raise your level of mind and thought and power. And then with that, what you're able to do is you're able to help others break their own cycles. So you can create more positive energy, more positivity, more good karma. And then over time, that negativity, those negative people can become positive because hopefully over time they can find uh, being mindful is being present, and then they can then develop their consciousness and their mindset. But ultimately we all have to work together and we have to help one another because we didn't know what we were going through, but now we do. And over time as we grow, it's our mission and our purpose to help the fellow man. And that's really why I think this connection and this power, and I think Becky, you and I have been really good, is I think what we can do is, person by person, every person watching this, I think it's normalizing your pain. And I think what we're doing is we're slowly creating more positivity. And I hope you on the other end know that you can do this for other people. And that's how good karma is formed. And to your point, Becky, is you can only do so much good without the world, at some point it has to bless you. Cause, and the more that you receive blessings, the more you're able to create that confidence and knowing that more positivity is gonna do. You have more energy to create.
Yes. Oh, and I see Monica's on. Hi, Monica. Monica. Hi, and thanks. Hi to everybody that was on. And you know, interacting with us. And it's so true when we come back to creation. Thank you for wording that so eloquently. It's we must own our things. We can't blame others. This is how generational trauma happens when we become victims of our reality. And I'm not dismissing people who are going through horrific things on the earth plane because there are places where people do not honestly have control over it.
Yes.
But for the majority of people who will be watching this, take a look at yourself. Look in the mirror and go, what is really going on? Look inside and be like, how can I show up differently today for myself first and then pass that ripple effect on to others? Because the laws of the universe, the laws of energy state that, it's that as above, so below, as within, so without. So if we work on the inside, those around us have to shift as well. This is what we refer to as timeline jumping in, the spiritual community and the metaphysical community, because as we raise our consciousness and our mindset, people will shift around us, like, magically. I didn't believe it at first, and then I'd see, like, some of my relationships around me shifting. Their mindsets would just shift, it's like a light bulb went off.
Mhm.
And then as my mind shift, it's like theirs would shift again, and it's like as we rise up, others will rise up too. And I'm not saying rise up that anybody's better or worse than anybody. It's just that level of consciousness. There's no race, there's no finish line. We're constantly evolving because when we stop evolving, we're dying. Like
Mhm.
honestly. And it's about every day showing up as a better version of yourself. And if you have a day that you're not, go to bed. The next day is a new chance to do that and be that present and mindful version of yourself, which I know you do because you're an amazing human. And I really appreciate your existence and I appreciate, you know, what we're doing here and serving the collective. Like it's so important to serve those around us and not be afraid to give of yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's tough, and I think what you said earlier is that self love and accepting our flaws and imperfections, and I think, when we do this, in hopefully, our next one in either a couple weeks or if we pivot with the holidays, I think that's maybe what we can really talk about is more about understanding some of those false beliefs or some of the delusions or some of the cognitive dissonance, and then how can we work on then like finding and accepting our flaws and the self-love and how our imperfections are kind of that perfection that we have. I think that would be a good segue for for people following along. And Monica, thanks for coming back, and thanks for being engaged uh 2 weeks ago, right?
Yes, Monica, I think was on the last one, the inner child healing. She's been a huge pivotal part of my journey.
uh,
We connected online as well and became, you know, talked back and forth and joined each other's journeys through pains and traumas and the expansion I've seen in her. Like I look at that and it's a reflection of expansion in myself too. It's like we're all reflections of each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's a mentor or a mentee, it's a mutual bond. We're always learning from one another. The moment you believe that you're all knowing and that there's nothing more you can learn, it's I think, you say it as when you're not growing. I look at it as when you're not learning, when you're not
Yeah.
creating new experience. Because once you believe that you've leveled up and there's no more new experiences or feelings or situations, ultimately that's when your mind it doesn't life is an infinite game,
It
until
is.
and once you think the game is over, then what's there to look forward to tomorrow?
You've lost the game if you think the game is over. That's my I always joke. It's like, in my community, it's so large now and people will come in and be like, "How do you know if you're enlightened?" I'm like, "Well, you're not enlightened when you say you're enlightened because nobody reaches that point. Very few people ever reach that point and there's always learning to do. There's always we're human. Like unless you're a Buddha or a Jeshua, Jesus, or a lot of these ascended masters, like there's so few people on the earth plane that are in that space. And even many of them that are still live a human experience. That's just who we are.
Yeah, and so, because so my back piece, I have, like, my own version of, like, me trying to find enlightenment on this earth, and that's kind of like been my journey. And what I realized is the enlightenment is almost the mindfulness. It's realizing the mind can work. But the thing is, what Buddha, Abraham, Jesus, all these other prophets, and what they, or just what, or all what they did was they were able to sustain it and find a path of nirvana where they were able to stay in that awakened state indefinitely. While humans, we can activate and become enlightened in the moment and for short periods, but it's the practices, it's the mindset, it's all of the things else that we have that creates the skill set and the knowledge to be able to endure. If you could do it 30 seconds and stay in that after meditation, hey, that's 30 seconds more than anyone else.
Exactly. And enlightenment is a personal journey. And thank you, Victoria. That's such a beautiful comment. I appreciate it. And you know what? I was just thinking everybody needs to go out today and do something that lights them up. And I want everybody who this touches to go out and just smile at somebody random today because a smile can change somebody's life, or a compliment to a stranger can change. You don't know what people are going through on this earth plane.
Yeah.
And I pulled a couple cards while we
Yeah.
shuffled. Do you mind if I just like
I
share them?
I
So
love that. Yeah, please do.
awesome. So I have the Starseed Oracle by Rebecca Campbell, which I just love. The artwork is so beautiful and the message is very beautiful. So three cards came out. And the first one is surrender to the sweetness. It says Venus energy, pleasure, joy, make love to life. So that goes in line with saying go out and do something today that lights you up. Whether it's going and dancing in your living room to some great music,
Or in
if
the
you celebrate
boardroom.
Christmas, go enjoy some Christmas lights. If you celebrate the holidays, the North American holidays, just do something. Like for me, I love playing my guitar. I'll go play my guitar for a bit. I'm going to go hang out with my kids and enjoy that. The second one is you're not alone. Isolation, physical connection, and community. And know that we live in an age where we're so connected, but we feel so alone. But no, we are all those droplets of water in the ocean. And if you're looking for new connections and new friends in your life, set the intention and they will come to you. I promise you that. And then the card I'm going to leave this on today is Weight of the World. Boundaries, let it go. It's not yours to carry. And this one gave me chills. I just saw it for the first time there. And this is about setting those boundaries, especially when we come into the triggers. Set boundaries with yourself. Don't allow people to treat you like garbage. Know who you are. Raise your bar. You're worthy.
Wow. I I love that. The weight of the world, let's just take it off and just put it down. Um, the and the other one was create positivity and connect. And what was the second card?
The second one was find pleasure in life. It was the find. So we had You're Not Alone, the
Yeah,
community card,
yeah.
and Surrender to the Sweetness.
And
So
that's a lot of what we said here.
surrender is a huge part of the journey. It's like being in the now. Just surrender to it and find the gratitude, things to be grateful for around you right now, because there's always something.
Yeah. And Monica, hey, I hope you enjoy the Wizard of Oz. I think that's a great play. And yeah, I definitely want to go out and go do something. Maybe I'll go out to eat or get out because I've been cooped up in my house so much in these last like 13 months since my divorce and my changing careers and just kind of changing my life path. I've been very hermetic. And so yeah, I'm definitely gonna go break some of that today. How about you, Becky?
Sounds good. I'm going to watch my son play hockey right after this. And then I probably just getting stuff ready for the holidays. I want to wrap some gifts and spend
How
time with
about
my kids.
How about for Becky? What are you gonna do for Becky?
What am
Not
I
for
gonna do for
kids,
Becky?
not gifts, not for
Um,
showing up as mom. What are
I'm
we
probably
doing
gonna
for
play
Becky?
some music today and just take
Love
some
it.
time to stretch and just be present because I find so much joy in that in my busy life. Just spending 10 minutes listening to some meditative music and stretching and just being present in my body.
I love it. Remember, you're worthy. and you're
Yes.
amazing. I appreciate this journey that we're on together, and I appreciate the energy we're creating. And Monica, thank you for coming for this one. This is
Thank
number two
you.
now, and I look forward to hopefully having you with us in 2 weeks when we do this again.
And everybody else, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
We'll probably
Victoria, come
change the
back.
next one to a Sunday or something, but we will let you know. We will put the events out there.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll definitely do this. So please come back. Please communicate. Hey, Scott, thank you so much. It's nice to have. Um,
Oh, I love that. Go learn some oracle cards. It's so fun. That's learning your intuition right there. So follow your intuition.
yeah, and I also believe a lot of that's manifestation and belief, and learning how you have a sense of control in your thoughts and belief and how you create. You have to believe in the magic of the universe. You have to believe in that. So if you don't, what's the point in learning it, right? And that's where,
Magic is all around us.
yeah. Well,
I'm
thanks.
gonna I'm gonna sign out with jazz hands today. So jazz hands, everybody have a good day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Again, from Sri Lanka. I'm from Sri Lanka, so Ayubowan, may you be blessed with a long life. Because one thing I learned on this journey for me is that's why I did this. Why my favorite series was ACE series, because I did an ACE score or ACE test, and I realized my complex PTSD from a young age. I was living a cursed life. My anxiety, my health issues, kind of what you said earlier, Becky, it was affecting my life. And I had to realize that for me to live a long life, I had to let this pain and the suffering go. If I was going to be a centurion, I was going to break 100, which I promised my daughter, and I will. I will at least be 105, and for my daughter. And I couldn't do that if I carried the anxiety, the pressure, if I was having heart palpitation,
Yeah.
if I was overeating to sustain. So for you all, may you be blessed with a long life because you deserve that.
Love everybody. Have a wonderful day and have a great existence. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.